The story of Adam and Eve in Genesis 3 is one of the most foundational and profound narratives in the Bible. It explores themes of temptation, sin, free will, and the fall of humanity. Here's a detailed, informative retelling of the story from Genesis 3. The fall of man, Genesis 3. The setting, Paradise Lost. At the beginning of Genesis, God creates the Garden of Eden, a lush and perfect paradise for Adam and Eve. This garden is filled with every kind of tree that is pleasing to the eye and good for food, Genesis 2:9, and it is described as a place where Adam and Eve live in perfect harmony with God and each other. They are given dominion over the animals and the earth and are told to be fruitful and multiply, Genesis 1:28. They are also given a very important command from God, Genesis 2:16, 17. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." The temptation. In Genesis 3, the story takes a pivotal turn. The serpent, described as more crafty than any other animal God had made, enters the scene. It's important to note that the serpent is often interpreted by Christians as Satan, or a representation of evil, though the text itself does not explicitly make this connection at the outset. The serpent approaches Eve and begins to question God's command. Genesis 3:1. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? Here, the serpent distorts God's command by implying that God is withholding something good from them. The question is designed to make Eve doubt God's goodness and generosity. Notice that the serpent doesn't immediately tell Eve to eat the fruit. Rather, it first plants seeds of doubt in her mind about God's intentions. Eve's response. Eve responds to the serpent by quoting God's command, but with a slight alteration. She says, Genesis 3:2-3, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" Notice that Eve adds the instruction, "You must not touch it," which is not part of God's original command. This subtle addition shows how the serpent's questioning has caused Eve to become uncertain and perhaps overly cautious. It also reveals the beginning of her misinterpretation of God's words. The serpent, seizing the opportunity, directly contradicts God's warning. Genesis 3:4, "You will not certainly die." This is a bold lie. The serpent claims that God is lying about the consequences of eating the fruit, and then it goes further to promise Eve something even more enticing. Genesis 3:5, "For God knows that when you eat from it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Here, the serpent appeals to Eve's pride and desire for autonomy. He suggests that eating the fruit will give her wisdom and godlike knowledge, making her equal to God. This is the essence of the temptation, the desire to elevate oneself to the status of God, to claim power and knowledge that was never meant to belong to humans. Eve's decision. The serpent's words are persuasive, and Eve begins to look at the fruit differently. She sees that the tree is good for food, pleasing to the eye, and desirable for gaining wisdom. Genesis 3:6. The language here mirrors the ways in which temptation works. It appeals to the desires of the flesh, the desire for beauty, and the desire for power or control. Eve takes the fruit, eats it, and then gives it to her husband, Adam, who is with her. Adam's involvement is crucial. He does not step in to prevent Eve from eating the fruit or correct the serpent's lies. Instead, he silently accepts the fruit and eats as well. The immediate consequences. The moment they eat the fruit, their eyes are opened and they become aware of their nakedness. Genesis 3:7. They experience a sense of shame and guilt which had not existed before. For the first time, they realize that they are vulnerable and incomplete. They try to cover themselves by sewing fig leaves together to make loincloths, symbolizing their newfound awareness of their vulnerability and separation from God. Before eating the fruit, they had enjoyed an intimate relationship with God, walking with Him in the garden. Genesis 3:8. But now they are afraid and attempt to hide from His presence. God's confrontation. In the cool of the day, God comes to walk in the garden, as He had done before. However, this time, Adam and Eve hide themselves from God among the trees. God calls out to Adam, Genesis 3:9, "Where are you?" God's question is not because He doesn't know where they are, but to prompt them to acknowledge their disobedience and shame. Adam responds, Genesis 3:10, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God then asks, "Who told you that you were naked?" Genesis 3:11, which leads to a revelation that they have disobeyed his command. The blame game. God asks Adam, "Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Genesis 3:11. Instead of owning up to his disobedience, Adam blames Eve. Genesis 3:12. "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it." Eve, in turn, blames the serpent. Genesis 3:13. "The serpent deceived me and I ate." This exchange reveals the breakdown of relationships, Adam and Eve's relationship with each other, with creation, and most importantly with God. God's judgment and promise. God then pronounces judgment on each of the participants in this sin. The serpent. Genesis 3:14, 15. "Cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel." This is the first prophecy of a coming Redeemer, often referred to as the Proto-Evangelium. It hints at the defeat of Satan by a future descendant of Eve, interpreted as Jesus Christ. The woman, Eve. Genesis 3:16. "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." This pronouncement speaks to the new dynamics in the relationship between men and women, marked by pain in childbirth and a power struggle between the sexes. The man, Adam. Genesis 3:17, 19. "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return." Adam's sin brings a curse on the earth itself, and he will have to work hard for food, facing death as the final consequence of sin. The promise of redemption. Despite the consequences, God also shows mercy. He makes garments of skin to clothe Adam and Eve. Genesis 3:21, symbolizing that God provides for their needs even in the aftermath of their sin. The fact that God uses animal skins is often seen as a symbolic foreshadowing of the sacrifice that would come later in history through Jesus Christ. Finally, Adam and Eve are banished from the Garden of Eden to prevent them from eating from the tree of life and living forever in their fallen state. They are sent east of Eden, where they are to live out their lives in the harsh realities of a cursed world. Key themes: free will. Adam and Eve's decision to eat from the tree reflects the human ability to choose between obedience and disobedience. Temptation and sin. The serpent's lies and Eve's fall illustrate how temptation can distort truth, leading to disobedience. Consequences. The fall brings consequences for Adam, Eve, and the serpent, as well as the world.